It is my great privilege, of course, in this ongoing campaign season to host a number of the candidates here for presidency of the United States. The Libertarian Party is truly a movement ascendant. The notion that the third party is somehow now a spoiler, that somehow we represent, and in full disclosure, of course, I am the chairman of the Rhode Island Libertarian Party, that somehow we represent a gadfly movement has been laid to waste. And in fact, if nothing else, we appear to be the only folks serious about the issues, as opposed to the current two parties who opinion poll, who market research, who subject every decision to an analysis of the, shall we say, the winds of politics. Joining me live on the air is someone who I think is incapable of submitting to the, shall we say, the whims of the Bali politic, and really represents his own brand, is none other than John Mcafee, cyber warrior, a serial entrepreneur, and now Libertarian candidate for the presidency of the United States. John, welcome for the first time to the coalition.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. My voice is a little gravelly. I've got the flu, but I think we can work through it.
Absolutely. John, one of the more stirring moments of the two-part Fox Business News Libertarian presidential candidate, and in fact, if you've missed it, we will have it up on the Coalition Radio website soon, but one of the more stirring moments really was your introduction. After other candidates had sort of danced around the issue, you really laid waste, if you will, to some of the, cliches about the libertarian movement, and you defined it in pretty bold, stark terms. So give us your vision, if you will, of the libertarian movement here in the United States.
Well, I think the libertarian movement is swelling, not officially or not on paper or not by having a libertarian card, but by people realizing how much has been taken from them. You never really appreciate something until you lose it. And by the way, I have lost freedom and privacy completely. The times I've been arrested for drug use, and so I know what that loss is. And it was in jail that I understood the value of privacy and liberty. But people are losing it not just in jail, but just by being in this country. We're being spied on by the NSA, by the FBI, and they keep asking for greater powers in spying. When we travel, we have to go through the TSA security, which they tell us is to protect us. So take off your shoes, take off your belt, put your hands near, let us frisk you. Meanwhile, we're going to closely scrutinize your personal belongings. I don't feel protected. This is exactly what happens going into prison. I feel like the enemy. So everybody is feeling, to some degree, the loss of these things. And as you lose things, you realize what you've lost. And when we stand up as libertarians and say, no, you are a human being and your body is your own, end of story, then people start realizing, oh my God, of course it is. And we didn't create this government to be our mother and father or our boss. We created it to serve us. But the government is now telling us what is right or wrong regarding what we do and how we behave. Not in a legal standpoint, but you can't take these drugs. If you're dying, you can't have access to the potentially life-saving new drugs because they may harm the dying. I mean, see the insanity. So I think that the libertarian movement is swelling by leaps and bounds, and people don't have a label yet to put on it.
You know, it's both ironic and compelling that you're speaking with me this weekend. Here in New England, what had traditionally been a celebration of Patriots' Day has become a mixed event. It's a celebration of all things patriotic in one sense, but it's also a solemn observance. And, of course, I'm talking about the Boston Marathon and just a few short years ago, the Boston Marathon bombing. I say ironic because you give rise to a prominent concern among libertarians in that in order to save us, we are stealing our most precious liberties. What was equally tragic in some minds to the loss of life is what happened in the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombing. First off, of course, you had an epic failure on behalf of the federal government in terms of quote-unquote security, while at the same time having been on the end of a trail of having spent billions in monitoring the society that they sought to protect. And at the same time, we saw a complete, shall we say, a complete destruction of the Fourth Amendment in terms of illegal search and seizure because of what happened in Watertown, Massachusetts, in terms of a shutdown, in terms of martial law of an entire city, in terms of door-to-door searches, when on both levels, both prior to the Boston Marathon bombing, the system failed us. All those billions, all those lost civil liberties to no end. Sovereign nations had warned us about the impending bombers. They'd warned us specifically about the two bad characters who were ultimately implicated. And then afterwards, when ultimately the surviving attacker was found, he was found well outside of a security zone that had encapsulated this complete destruction of our American civil liberties. What say you, 9/11, post 15 years now, almost 15 years, to the state of American security, both its failures and are, in fact, there any successes?
I don't see any successes whatsoever. What I do see is the fact that we as citizens voluntarily gave up many rights for the illusion of security. After 9/11, the government stepped in and using our fears and our shock, said, don't worry, we will protect you. All we have to do is form Homeland Security. We'll start frisking you as you get on airplanes. We're going to start watching you. Please, it's really our fault. The government is a reflection of us. In fact, government is a reflection of every aspect of human character. When people get angry, individuals, maybe a bloody nose might result. When governments become angry, entire nations are wiped out. When people get greedy, you just don't invite them to dinner anymore. When governments get greedy, entire nations starve. And then when people are paranoid and fearful, you stay away from them. But when governments get paranoid, the citizens have nowhere to go. And the citizens are among those that the government fears. And that's where we are. We are at the final stages of a completely dysfunctional and insane government. But we did create this, and we did accept it voluntarily. But it's time to stop. It's time to do something. It's time to change this political landscape. And this is the year. I mean, good Lord, if you've watched any of the Republican debates early on anyway, they're making fun of the way each of them put their makeup on. My God, don't you realize, people, that we have serious problems in this country, and we do not need a clown show like this. And that's what we have. So hopefully, people are waking up. I know they're hurting from loss of liberty and loss of privacy. I know just from the fact that so many people jumped on Trump's bandwagon that they are dissatisfied with this two-party system, and they're dissatisfied with politics. Politics, by the way, if you look it up in Webster's or the Oxford English Dictionary, the definition of politics is those practices and procedures necessary to gain power within governments and to retain power within governments. Did you see something wrong with this? I don't want someone looking for power to run this country. I want someone who wants to serve, like George Washington. He was drugged, kicking and screaming into the presidency slot. I mean, who in their right mind would want to serve millions of people after a relatively old man, after being the general in the Great War of Independence? No, that was not a promotion. And Dwight Eisenhower, the very last president who really wanted to serve. Now, he was not a particularly great president. I have to say that. However, he was the last one who truly wanted to serve, and he had been the supreme Allied commander for half of the world's armies. Now, that was not a promotion for him to become president of the U.S., but they pushed him into that, and he did the best that he could. And when he left office, he warned us. He said, you have to beware the military-industrial complex and its association with politics. And what he warned us about has come true. We're living it. We're living this nightmare of chaos. I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you were in Watertown, Massachusetts, the day after the, and I'll use air quotes here, successful interdiction of Mr. Zarnev, the surviving Mr. Zarnev, you were treated to the sight of citizens lining the streets, cheering those military forces, if you will, that had just taken control of a city, had just, again, usurped every civil liberty that we had left, had ultimately failed, were successful really almost on a lark. You saw citizens cheering. So the great challenge, one of the great challenges of the libertarian movement is how do we take a society that often celebrates its capitulation to a government that is acting as an overlord? How do we change that? How do we roll that back?
I think just by education. I mean, let's take simple things. A small amount of education can change the world and certainly change a mind. I mean, let's take privacy, for example. I horrifically hear people saying, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. So that person who says that does not understand what privacy is. They have no clue. For example, every one of us, every man, woman, and child, exercises privacy choices hundreds or thousands of times per day. As an example, a stranger sitting next to you on a bus, they're spiking up a conversation, you're not going to tell that person the most intimate details of your life. I mean, unless you're totally stoned. To a friend you just met, you probably will divulge a little more. To a close friend, you might divulge a lot. And to your spouse, you might divulge everything, unless you're having an affair, in which case you might choose not to divulge that. This is not a moral issue. This has nothing to do with morality. It simply has to do with the glue that holds a harmonious society together. If we all knew everything about everyone else, we'd have riots in the street, beginning with a rash of spousal shootings. So people who say that do not understand privacy. But a 2-minute discussion or a 2-minute talk will make people go, oh, you're right. Because seriously, with every person, every relationship that you have, and every entity, whether it be your work, your boss, or the government, you change the rules of what you will divulge. And we do that just for safety's sake and to keep the society harmonious. Your boss, you might only divulge those things which will ensure that you get a nice review and possibly a raise or a promotion. But every single relationship that we have involves a different privacy choice. If you take that choice away from us, who are we? Who are we? And I can promise you, without privacy, there can be no liberty.
Americans' concept of liberty has changed drastically, particularly in the years post 9/11. You hit, of course, on one of my favorite cliches, the notion that you have nothing to worry about if, in fact, you exceed all access to the government, to those that should, in fact, control you. The courage to fight that, the courage to rip that back. Many people talk about the feminization of the American male and the elimination, if you will, of the rugged American individualism that, in one large case and after another, brought us to where we are as a successful society. Do you buy into that? Is the American male lost to us? And in fact, as a society, do we have the strength internally to grab back the reins of privacy?
There's not much femininity in me. And yes, absolutely. We have the power. We have the power. We need to understand who we are. We are not gods, and we do not rule this planet, but we rule ourselves if we're wise, if we're lucky, and if you know who you are and you're aware of your talents and your shortcomings completely, then nothing is impossible. Because the human spirit is infinite in its capacity. It is indomitable if you know yourself. So I agree there is sort of a feminization of the American male, and I don't know whether that's good or bad, but it's not my task and it's not my path. Anybody who really knows me, there really is not much feminine, and I am gentle, and as kind and gracious as I can be in life, because there really is no other way to live harmoniously. But I promise you, if you take too much from me, you'll find a different person.
On that note, we're going to take a very brief break. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Coalition on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network. It is my great privilege and honor to have cyber warrior, liberty warrior, John Mcafee, Libertarian candidate for the presidency of the United States. John, again, thank you in the middle of a crazy busy schedule for taking the time to join us up here in New England. Some very specific issues, if you will. Let's talk, because I think they provide an excellent backdrop to your analysis of where the security of the United States and its investments are best levied. You talk about the war on drugs. You talk about the notion that the war on drugs is and you point out quite aptly that it's a complete failure, and how it affects our foreign policy. What needs to happen here in a John McAfee presidency?
Well, we need to get out of that war. We do. We need to decriminalize all drugs. There are many ways the executive branch could do this. Instructing the drug tables, everything be reset to zero. But it doesn't matter how it's done. It just has to be done. I've been arrested a number of times for the use of drugs. The first time was in 1971 in Bristol, Virginia. I was smoking weed on the street. I got arrested. When I got out of jail, I went home, rolled another, went to the exact same spot, and lit up, and got arrested again. When I got out the second time, I left town and went to Mexico. I was just fed up with because I would be facing 25 years for the third offense. So this is so bizarre. Our prisons are just filled with decent people who smoked a single joint sometimes. And it doesn't matter whether it's marijuana or cocaine or even heroin. The addiction to heroin is its own punishment. The addiction to any of these drugs is its own punishment. We don't need to punish people more. And you cannot, in fact, legislate. You can't criminalize independent human freedoms. It's your body. If you want to have sex, you're going to have sex, no matter what someone says. No, you can't have sex. You're going to do it. I mean, look at some of the fundamental Christian organizations. They teach their children, no, you don't have sex till you're married, but they have just as much sex as people who are told not to. You can't legislate these things. What you're going to do is what you're going to do. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, will in fact, if in fact your ultimate opponent is in fact Ted Cruz, do we risk the debate over the use of sex toys and his rather extensive legal experience at trying to litigate over sex toys? Will that in fact be part of a national presidential debate?
Well, it may be. If I'm on stage, it will be. Mm-hmm. We are all adults in this country. We've been fed baby food for 50 years. I can tell you, I know for a fact, we are all adults enough to eat adult food and to listen to adult conversations and entertain adult ideas. You find me somebody who doesn't have a sex toy stashed somewhere, really, or who has not had a sex toy, or doesn't know someone who has a sex toy. You find me someone who doesn't smoke weed, or has not known someone who smoked weed, or has smoked weed. If we can't talk about these things when many of us have done them, or wanted to do them, or know people who have done them, and they are close friends of yours, then we're in sad shape. We really are. It's time we had some adult conversations on the political stage.
What impact do you believe the war on drugs has had on our national security? Having lived abroad,
it's horrible. I mean, one of the side effects of our war on drugs is the creation of the most brutal and most powerful criminal organization the world has ever seen, the Sinaloa cartel, that has literally murdered, tortured, mismembered, and brutalized millions of people. Tell me that doesn't have an effect on our national security, because they are operating inside our borders in every tiny town in America. If there's drugs available, The Sinaloa cartel presence is there. Now, you tell me that we did not create that. We did. We did. If we had not criminalized drugs, the cartel could not exist. We just have free movement of drugs. So yes, it's a huge drain on our national security, plus the money that the DEA has spent, which is trillions of dollars, could easily have been spent in more fruitful pursuits, like creating a cybersecurity system in America that actually functions.
Yeah, I want to get to that in a second, but if you will, draw a parallel now between what I'll call the emerging war on prostitution, and I use in air quotes trafficking, versus the war on drugs. It would appear that similar parallels exist in governmental behavior. You've got the incentivization of the American legal system to prosecute, to detain, to essentially steal from the American citizen any capital they have because of their alleged ties to these organizations. Do you see a historical parallel here?
Well, we're talking about something that's very close to my heart. My wife, who I've been married to for 3.5 years, was forced into prostitution at the age of 20, and for 20 years suffered under the most brutal, vicious pimp, which is like most pimps. Why do prostitutes have pimps? Well, pimps can kidnap women. They can force women. The police aren't going to do anything, are they? The woman is prostituting herself. You can't get a restraining order against a pimp. Do you think that's going to be enforceable?
Mm-hmm.
No. So these women are trapped, brutalized. My wife was not allowed to talk to her family, her children, was isolated, beaten mercilessly, hospitalized. And when I met her, she was just at her wit's end, just run down and had nowhere to turn. And I took her in and escaped with her from Miami to Portland. Her pimp tracked her down, called me and said he was going to kill me, send some gang members. And I just said, well, please, let me tell you the facts of life. Come on yourself, too, because you're all going to go home in body bags. I'm sorry to say this on the radio, but how do you talk to someone like that who said, I'm going to come and kill you? I was just letting you know, you might, but I tell you what, I'm not going to back down. I'm not. I rescued this woman. I love this woman, and you can do anything that you friggin' want. But I promise you, there will be a hell of a fight. And it never came. Never came. So this is close to my heart. If prostitution were legalized, we wouldn't have any more prostitutes than we have now. There are as many prostitutes in any society as the market will bear. And if you look at Denmark, there's no more prostitutes per capita there where it's legal as it is here where it's illegal. The criminalization just marginalizes these women so that they cannot get help from the police. They cannot get help from anyone. They're brutalized by clients, by their pimps. And the police, you would not believe how many police will arrest a prostitute and then ask for sexual favors to let them go. I know this. So it's got to stop, too. It's just like drugs. If we criminalize something that people are just going to do, they're just going to do it. People are going to have sex, and people are going to hire anonymous or random sex partners. This will never go away. It's the oldest profession, allegedly.
Speak to, if you will, in both cases, whether it be drugs or whether it be prostitution, the growing industries, often, if you will, co-sponsored or co-opted by government, that exist to, and I use, again, air quotes on the radio, that exist to support them. Whereas our government dollars, whether it be alleged interdiction, alleged support, create a vast industry, usually through crony capitalist ties.
Yes.
And do accomplish nothing, by the way, on behalf of the...
That's the whole point. They accomplish nothing. Nothing, because we're missing the point. We're missing the point. If you're dealing, let's say it's going to remain criminalized. Well, the only way to deal with the problems there is by force or confrontation. Seriously, there's no other way to do it, and that's a tragic option if it's the only one. If it were legal, pimping would simply disappear. There would not be this profession, because the first time the pimp beat a woman half to death, she'd go to the police, and he would spend years in jail. So think about it. the industry created this subset of, quote, helpers is non-functional, and it helps nothing because people do not understand the reality that my wife had lived, for example.
And so there's symbiotic relationship between crime and the government that would purport to prevent it coexist because of the incredible degree of wealth that can be derived by both sides. It's really an unfortunate handshake, if you will, between the two.
Of course, and it's a tragedy, and it has to stop. But like the way you just said it, smart people could listen to that and start thinking, oh, I never looked at it that way. Where we're getting back to education. If we just inform people a little, they can take it from there. You know, we're smart humans. We're smart. It doesn't take much. Shine a little light in this corner, and all will be revealed. And this is what we've got to do. And this is, as libertarians, we have to tell people, number one, it's your body. It's your body, and it's your mind. You know, if you want to study something bizarre or witchcraft or whatever, it's your mind. Put into it what you wish. And it's also your body. You may choose to put something in it or not. If the government says we're going to force vaccination on you, resist bodily and soul. Because no one has the right to force you to do something to your body or to force you not to do something to your body and your mind.
Eloquently said. We're going to take another quick break here. Folks, if you're just joining us, you're listening to the Coalition on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network. Of course, we are on WPRO AM 630, 99.7 FM, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Stay tuned. Next up, we talk money and taxes and power.
Now, back to the Coalition with Pat Ford on News Talk 630 and 99.7 FM, WPRO.
And yes, we are back. The Coalition on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network, AM 630, 99.7 FM. Joining me live on the line, cyber warrior, libertarian warrior, John Mcafee, candidacy for the Libertarian nomination for the presidency of these United States. John, when you talk about cabals, when you talk about terrorist organizations, of course, as libertarians, we all agree, and I'm saying it for the first time on these airwaves, taxation is indeed theft. Now, we have an organization in the United States called the Internal Revenue Service, which was ostensibly created to collect the revenues necessary to, as libertarians like to say, build the roads, because if it wasn't for the IRS, who would build the roads? Now, as we've moved into the 21st century, that organization has become, if you will, the ultimate political instrumentation for the collection of revenue for every known, base instinct of every politician here in this country. We've got Obamacare. Healthcare is now collected and funded, if you will, by the Internal Revenue Service. They are the authoritarian wing, the gun aimed at our heads if we do not play games with the variety of state human health services. Number two, we've got a variety of tax credits which have been put in for any one of 1,000 special interests. And those, of course, are collected and aimed straight at the American taxpayer by the Internal Revenue Service. What should happen to this Internal Revenue Service, John?
Well, first and foremost, there are more IRS agents in America than there are FBI agents. Now, think about this for a minute. And the IRS has overwhelming power. I mean, they don't need court orders. They just go and freeze bank accounts. They take. If you haven't paid enough taxes or enough in their mind, they will simply take more, whatever they think is right, whatever they think they want, whatever they think they need, or whatever they think you can afford. So the IRS, we don't need it. We don't need it. I mean, and talk about subsidiary industries. Look at the hundreds of thousands of tax preparers that you have to go to because our tax code is so complex and so convoluted. It's like a spider web. The average American cannot even understand it. I mean, right off the bat, even if you thought taxes were legal, which they are not, even if you thought it was legal, surely you should at least have a system that we can understand. But we can't. And it's there for a purpose, so that when they choose, they can just go in and manipulate and remove from your bank whatever they choose. So no, we do not need it. And it's going to be impossible in the near term to get rid of the IRS and continue to function as a government. But certainly, as a start, can't we have a flat rate of 10%? And that's the beginning. And if it's 10%, I mean, what do we have to worry about? Here's what I earned. Here's the 10%. And then in the following years, we learn other means of funding the government. And there are thousands of other means. Goods for services. The national park revenues are huge. So we don't need it. We do not need it. And it has become so overbearing, so powerful, and so machine-like. It's robotic. There's no soul there. There's no heart there. They don't really care what they're doing to people, burdening them way beyond.
Now, you've lived in other parts of the world where taxation is not a function directly of income, and where you don't have these Byzantine rules. What as an entrepreneur who's been very successful in a variety of forums, what type of environment is left to create in the absence of this archaic Byzantine setup? I mean, talk about places like Bermuda, for example, where the first function is not the taxable impact of a transaction. It's actually how it accretes income to the shareholder. Tell me about that. Well,
okay, so here's you mentioned something about business, okay, and I'd like to add entrepreneurism to that. This is another issue, and I'll get back to taxes in just 1 second, but it's become almost impossible for the average American to start a business these days. You've got to fill out 1,000 forms. You've got to get OSHA involved. You've got to meet the requirements. You have to get a license to even begin with. This is insane. This does not foster creativity and innovation. Now, back to taxation. That's the other thing. Certainly, startup businesses should be exempt from any sort of barriers to success, because that's the future of our country. It's our children and grandchildren who will work in such businesses or start such businesses. So taxation is killing business. It is killing everything. At least income tax, even business income tax. As far as other countries are concerned, excuse me, police, has very limited power to actually enforce taxation, and they operate simply on corruption, which is the same thing. The police stop you on a highway and demand $50 from you, and you pay it because if you don't, the bad things are likely to happen to you. Is there any difference? There isn't, because isn't the government being a highway robber now?
Well, you speak of these different environments where entrepreneurism is allowed to flourish. What to you is the ideal tax structure? Assuming, of course, as we like to smile as libertarians and say, who will build the roads? What tax structure do you advocate when you're president of the United States?
Yeah, I advocate somewhere between 10 and 15% flat tax. I would also advocate that startup businesses, for some period of time, are exempt. Period. Why? They're our future. They're a future of our economy. Because really, how are you going to collect taxes if there's nothing to tax? I mean, think about this, because the taxation system now is crippling our economy. So I think that start-up businesses of any kind, I don't care whether it's shoe shine or dry cleaners or a high-tech company, because we need these. We cannot put barriers. We cannot put burdens. Let them go for a while. And honestly, I would love to see a system of no taxation. I think it's doable. I really do. There are many ways to fund government that can continue to build our roads and keep them in repair. So, I know that sounds radical, and I'm sorry, but I believe this in my heart. I mean, I'm a mathematician, and I know how to add 2 and 2. And there are many ways to fund our government without stealing from people's hard work.
Another one of our favorite bogeymen as libertarians is, of course, is the Federal Reserve. What are your thoughts on monetary policy and the Fed, as they seem to have become the principal instrument of American economic planning? I
would like to see us return to something in the 20s. But here's the issue. The Fed will disappear without us doing anything. Do you know why? Cryptocurrencies. Now, currently, cryptocurrencies are tiny. I mean, the latest estimate is $6 billion in America, which is, I mean, there are tons of medium-sized companies that earn more than that. However, it's like something that has been let out of Pandora's box. You can't put it back in. It is coming. And when cryptocurrency becomes the standard, how can a government tax what they cannot see? And you're going to rely on people's honesty. I mean, because there simply is no way to find out what someone has earned through cryptocurrency or what someone has spent or on what. I think this is fantastic. Who needs to know what I'm spending money on?
Well,
seriously. So the Fed will disappear. It will. And this is coming rapidly. In 5 years.
As a result, do you see deficit spending, though, in the manner in which it's taking place, to be a constant in American politics as we move forward?
Well, it can't be. I mean, it can't be. Get real. At some point, we will collapse. You cannot deficit spend forever. I mean, a child could understand this. A child can understand this. And artificially creating a monetary policy by some people in the back room going, well, let's raise the interest rates a quarter of a point. That's bizarre. Let the market do it. Let the market tell us what money is worth.
The final area that I want to concentrate on for tonight, and again, if you're just joining us late, we've got cyber warrior, libertarian warrior, John Mcafee, candidate for presidency of the United States, joining us. Of course, as one of the, I'll call it the leading tech visionaries of our generation, you clearly see cyber warfare as an ongoing and soon-to-be major part of the defense of the United States. Seemingly our opponents, and I use that term loosely, whether it be the Chinese government, the Soviet Union, various spin-offs of, continue to accelerate their use of cyber warfare as an economic tool against the United States. So, if you will, bring us into the 21st century where we should be.
All right. First and foremost, we're a good 20 years behind Russia and China. Mm-hmm. In 1979, in the second year of Deng Xiaoping being the supreme ruler of China,
right.
He had an epiphany and said, he got his people together and said, software will be far more deadly than any nuclear bombs we can build. And he, at that point, set off on a program to do two things. One, to create a shield around China so that no one could penetrate it. And we can't penetrate it. No one can penetrate it. It is ironclad. And number two, we will create weaponized software that can destroy whoever or whatever we want at the click of a mouse, although they didn't have mouses back then. And that's what China has done. What did we do? We didn't even invent the word until the early 90s. And our government is so ossified, so bureaucratic, that we don't have the creativity and all the things that are necessary to keep up. Now, we have in this country some of the greatest minds in the world in terms of cybersecurity, and our government will have nothing to do with it. They're the white hat hackers. I go to DEF CON every year, and I keynoted 2 years ago at DEF CON. These are the brightest people in the world. But the government's not going to hire them because they are marginalized. The word hacker itself is not acceptable to the government. Plus, these people have purple mohawks and 10-gauge earrings and tattoos on their face. So the government will not hire them. But you know what the Chinese and the Russians do? They actively recruit from the cyber crime mobs within Russia and China. Why? Because they're smart enough to know that's what all these people do, is they find ways to break into things and protect themselves while they're doing it and steal. These are the people we want. Now, I'm not suggesting we go that far, but surely we can bend our rules enough so that if we want a functional cyber security system, that we will let someone with a purple mohawk who insists on wearing Bermuda shorts and sandals, we'll let them do that and let them smoke dope in the basement if that's what they want, because they're not going to work for the government otherwise. I mean, these kids make $1 million a year working for American corporations, but the government won't touch them. And corporations cannot secure us. They can't. And it has to be part of our national defense.
And they won't, because ultimately their loyalty lies elsewhere. We're going to take one last quick break. Folks, we're with John Mcafee again, tech visionary, tech warrior, libertarian candidate for president of the United States. One quick break. John, if you could hang on for a second, I'd like you to come back and just tell us how we can be active in your campaign and how we can support your presidency. Folks, you're listening to The Coalition. We'll be right back. And we're back with John Mcafee, libertarian candidate for the president of the United States. John, thank you so much for joining us for this entire hour. We've only got a few seconds left. How can we be part of your army?
Just go to Mcafee2016.com. That's MCAFEE2016.com. Press the volunteer button. Press donate. Do what you can do. We're running lean and mean, and we do need help. And thank you again for having me on the station.
And John, I look forward to seeing you in Orlando at the Libertarian National Convention. Folks, John Mcafee, someone who clearly takes it personally. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll be back soon.
WEAN FM Wakefield Peacedale. WPRO Providence, a Cumulus station.